Hello and welcome to Simblified. This is your host, Chuck. Well, one of your hosts anyway. And we are going to do part 2 of our conversation with Siddharth Rao, where we speak to him about all things Web3 and, basically what's the fuss about the whole thing is, and some very, very practical questions. If you're listening to this episode before having heard any simplified episodes in the past, or just skipped last week's episode, go back and listen to last week's episode, actually, because that was part 1 of the interview. It sets a lot of context and we asked a lot of basic questions in that episode, and then come back to this one. And for everyone who has heard that, well, on with the show, I say. What is the utopia that Web3 evangelists are seeing in the future? Because I'm not seeing okay, here's the thing. I think right now we have reached a point where we all agree that the internet in its current form is indispensable to the way the world works, the way we entertain ourselves, so on and so forth, right? It's too much to take back. Maybe entertainment we can take back, but everything else, financial, healthcare, everything is too ingrained in everything. I'm trying to rewind my head to, say, 1990, where it was in such a nascency, there was so much skepticism around it, etc. And I could time travel. I know then in 1990 language, I could explain like what the internet really means. It's not about buying shoes online. It's something a lot more than that. And maybe it's just that we don't have the vision to be able to see it right now. So what I'm really asking you, Sid, is that you clearly have all Web3 evangelists are clearly able to see what the world is going to look like in, say, 2040, at least with respect to the internet. Can you paint a picture of that for us? What is that future and that promise that Web3 is showing beyond, sharing the wealth and all that? Because that to me seems like a very, very small use case, right? I have a feeling most people who use Twitter really don't want a part of Twitter ads money. They just want a platform to go put their thoughts, follow others and whatever, right? So can you paint a little picture, or is that too vague? But any sense of what that final utopia looks like, I think would help a lot of us.
Yeah. So there are many different schools of thought here. Like you said, those 17, 18-year-olds who started growing up during the COVID era were sitting at home. They're happy being remote work. Well, they're like, I'll live in the metaverse type. Again, this is a gross generalization, but again, you can't live in the metaverse entirely. You still need to go to the toilet. You still need to eat. Right. So yeah, so that's there. And again, then there is the Balaji Srinivasan school of thought, where again, I do trust Balaji has given it a lot of thought, and I've not yet read or questioned his work yet. And he's like, we started creating our own companies, then we created our own currency, we created our own communities, and now we can create our own nation. And nation is not by geographic boundaries, it's going to be like all intellectual maybe boundaries. I don't know how to say that, how else to put it. And then there is someone like me who is like, not everything has to be decentralized. The blockchain technology in itself has its efficiencies. Let me give you an example.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example of Zoom versus this product called Huddle 01.
I have seen Huddle. Yes, I have Huddle 10, right? I have seen it. Yes.
Yeah. So Huddle works exactly like Zoom. You can come in here, have this great video call. And Zoom is a pure Web2 product. People love using Zoom. People cannot live without Zoom in today's world. If you're
let's not say love using Zoom.
Yeah, okay, but use Zoom.
Let's be clear.
Yeah, they can't live without Zoom. Right? The number of people Zoom has enabled to create businesses, it's immense. And Huddle is built on a peer-to-peer network. And that being a Web3 product, everybody automatically assumes it's going to be more inefficient because, hey, blockchain and hey, peer-to-peer network, it's going to be slower. But if you look at Huddle today, it is faster than Zoom, has higher quality than Zoom, and has lower latency.
Okay.
And everything is better. People will use Huddle 01. There are teachers using Huddle 01 in schools today. They don't care whether it's Web3. They don't care whether it's NFT.
They just care it's a good product. It's what Srikeit said earlier. They just want a better experience.
They just want better experience. People just want better experience. So that's what it is, right? You're here to solve problems. You're not here to create a cult. So
well said.
Yeah.
Okay, I know you have a lot more to say, Sid, but I genuinely feel the Web3 community space as a whole could use sane minds like yours a little more and
Yeah, I
less
swear,
people
yeah.
with pixeled avatars who, never mind. Let's not get there.
Yeah,
But anyway, back to the point you made. Actually, Huddle 01 is a great example. So how does Huddle 01 then have all those qualities that you said of having low latency and all that without the money that Zoom does, without, I'm assuming, the servers that Zoom has with AWS or whoever it is? So how is it technologically able to do that? And two, just from a regular person perspective, why should I switch over to Huddle 01? I mean, let's start from there. Let's start from and Zoom versus Huddle 01 is a great use case, I think, to start this to explain.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about Huddle 01 first. Again, I don't know the absolute intricacies, but Zoom, in order for it to become Zoom and for us to talk like this over Zoom, has to use I think 8 or 10 different services where they use AWS, they use 8 to 10 different services. And then all of them come together is what gives you that latency.
Yeah.
But when you are using one network and one single protocol to communicate with one another, I think Huddle uses only about 2 or 3 different things coming in together and giving you that. So it's a lot more efficient. And they're creating an entire protocol where it's not just Huddle 01 as a video conference. They've created a protocol to make peer-to-peer calling a lot easier. So anyone can come in and build a Viber. They can come in and build a WhatsApp call. You can build peer-to-peer calling, wallet-to-wallet calling, or anything using Huddle's protocol.
Sure.
And anybody can do that. And another thing is Huddle's master stroke, in my opinion, was they did not make it compulsory for you to have a wallet to come in and it.
Yeah, I tried doing that. I remember when they asked me MetaMask, but I said, no, I don't want to do all that nonsense. They said, okay, if you don't have, you can just sign up over here. Yeah.
Correct.
So again, very, very noob question, but I'm guessing this can be then extrapolated to a lot of other use cases. How does Huddle make money in that case? Suppose we want to do our next recording like this, and then we're just going to use Huddle for free. How does Huddle make money that way?
So Huddle is not making any money right now. Their whole focus is to create that protocol. So once people start using their protocol, they can charge a small fee off of it. But they do not have the permission to shut that app down.
Okay, this is interesting. I think there's a small bit over there, which I think we will have to discuss, which is the whole money-making part for Web3 things overall. But I also see on their site something called token gating and all that. So could you talk about that a little bit? One. And two, I think whatever you said about Huddle 01 so far has been a great elevator pitch for there's that word again. What's the chances we used elevator pitch twice in a simplified recording? My thing is, why can't they just sell it as a better version of Zoom or do video calls with lower latency, etc., etc.? My point is, why give it the baggage that exists about Web3? Because when I open it right now, I'm immediately like, oh, Web3 native Zoom for DAOs. Like, one, that's complicated. Two, if I've been on Twitter, then both of these are red flags to me. And I will want to use something, I consider safer, or at least doesn't have a pixeled monkey somewhere over there. So both of these questions, kind of like the same, but take it away.
Yeah, it's a great question. Why Huddle 01 cannot be another Zoom, right? So how many video conferencing apps can you name after Zoom and Google Meet? Can you name 5?
I unfortunately know MS Teams, but yeah, sure. But possibly not more than 5.
You can't name 5, you can't name the next 5, right? So again, you see
WhatsApp call doesn't, I'm assuming WhatsApp call, the accidental Instagram. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I get your point.
Yeah, so if the market is concentrated, right?
Yeah.
What they're planning to do is they have a larger vision in mind. They're like, let's make communication decentralized. Like content delivery and communication can be decentralized. You don't need to depend on a geo working right now. This whole thing could just go down if one geo tower or something just stopped working.
Sure.
Or it could also be maybe the Act Fiber net, or it could be something, it could be anything. Maybe Zoom going down or this StreamYard going down. It could be anything. But when you have a peer-to-peer network, the chances of these happening are very, very low. The points of failure are very, very low.
Yeah.
And once you create that protocol and many people come and start building these communication apps on top of it, that's how Huddle is going to make their money. When other people start using that protocol. But then the argument could be, hey, that's centralized again. It's like using AWS.
Yeah, that's a question
it's a
catch-22,
so to speak.
Yeah. The beauty of protocols is that AWS, somebody can just click a button and shut you down, and protocols, nobody can do that, because you're governed by a set of rules that are on chain, and when it's on chain, it's immutable. Those are the rules. The CEO Ayush cannot go and shut you down. But then again, it brings up a different point where maybe ISIS could run their own podcast on it.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are so many things. I mean, this entire conversation, I know it's been very theoretical. There's some things that we brought into it, but there are, again, all these ethical regulatory questions, right? Like Naren at the beginning was ranting about how Twitter has kicked Trump off. And I genuinely did not know how to react to that, whether that is a good thing or a bad thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so these kind of, and I'm not asking for a resolution for that right now, but these kind of questions will exist, right? Yeah, ISIS could host their own podcast. I mean, there could be all sorts of, edge cases, like you said. It seems to me, and this is me being extremely liberal with respect to what I see in Web3 right now, it seems that the best case scenario for Web3 is that some of the practices and some of the spirit of Web3 is imbibed and utilized, I guess, in what are Web 2.0 companies or apps today. Is that sort of like one way of thinking?
Oh, absolutely. So again, blockchain's a technology. It's not revolution on its own, its slogans or anything. Blockchain's a technology. If you go open the Indian government's website, you'll see the number of projects India is actually building on the blockchain.
Building on blockchains.
And
all these consultancies like CTS, TCS, Accenture, all of these guys have separate blockchain departments that help their legacy clients migrate to blockchain, banking via blockchain and all that. So there's no doubt that blockchain as a technology is a solid concept which has many, many benefits. And I guess one of the big mistakes that people make is conflating blockchain with cryptocurrency as a whole and ascribing the pros and cons of one to the other, which I think is a separate episode by itself. Sorry. That was a deviation.
No, absolutely. I get it. But again, you don't get to decide the inflation rates in India, right? The central bank does. And we are just at the brunt of it. And it's affecting us. And they want this regulation. See, everybody wants regulation. Everybody wants power in their hands. And everybody feels like they're doing good for the people. The opposite of that, opposite of regulation, is absolute entirely free markets, right? What happens with free markets? Maybe money laundering, terrorists getting a lot of money, they're getting funded, they're causing a lot of problem in the world. There is no fine balance. We feel that we've achieved a fine balance by, bringing in regulation, removing money laundering, all of this. But we have prevented free markets to a huge degree. Again, there are believers in completely free markets. There are believers in absolute regulation. Anybody in fintech today, they love regulation. They are very palsy with them. If you go and ask Vijay Shekhar Sharma of Paytm, he may not like cryptocurrency. It's against his interest, right? So it's very tricky. Nobody knows what it's going to be.
I think this is also another aspect, right? And coming back to that other point of solving every problem, so to speak. I mean, the thing is, a lot of people are asking all of these fundamental and repeating all of these fundamental questions of a lot of Web3 technologies, and saying that, it falls down on this test, it falls down on that test, or it does not answer so-and-so questions. The one thing I'd say is, I think there can be a space, and I think that could be something where just there is an acknowledgement of the fact that this is not completed or resolved technology as yet, right? And the other aspect being that even the existing monetary technological system that we have has so many fundamental flaws. Like, for example, if you look at that's what Naren gave the example of Twitter banning Trump, right? Like, where you are saying on one hand, yes, instinctively we all know it was the right thing to do, but from a free speech point of view, it's a major problem, right? And so that itself creates that dichotomy. So you can't, there are current technologies, the way current monetary systems work, that are fundamental flaws that are very, very deep-rooted. And we have progressed with them. It's because humankind has worked with them for centuries and we know no other way, right?
Yeah. So, exactly. And that's beautifully phrased, because I was struggling to phrase a question in my head. And I think you actually put it out there. Just help me a little bit. It's almost like whenever we think of something revolutionary, and there's no doubt that Web3 is something that's revolutionary, like if a lot of people don't get it, then it's likely to be revolutionary. The problem is we are always weighed down by what we know and use at the moment, right? So when we think of Web3, we are always thinking, but Web2 is already doing this, even though there are flaws, which is why a few questions back I asked you for what that utopia is. And unfortunately, there also your answer, our discussion after that went back to what we know about Web2 right now in the form of Zoom or Facebook, etc.
Yeah.
And again, so here's where Srike's observation helped, right? Like if you try to revamp the monetary system today, the fact is you're trying to revamp with the current monetary system, knowing that all of us need to have yeah, exactly. All of us need to still earn our salaries and all that by the time we decide what to do with the monetary system and we get to this thing. So another kind of radical way of looking at this is scrap everything in terms of monetary systems and, okay, if not monetary systems, at least in terms of the internet right now. I've heard many people say that Web3 is closer to Web1 than it is to Web2. And Web2, I understand, has just complicated the whole thing with a whole bunch of capitalism and just a few decision makers and all that sort of thing. Let's try another way to explain the utopia that Web3 evangelists have. Let's take Web3 back to, say, the 70s and 80s. Windsurf and Rob Khan had just come out with the concept of TCP/IP, and it was as 1.0 as we could get. Now, assume that we had all the technology ability, whatever. In a couple of years, we have like all these machines. We have maybe not AWS, but whatever it is. From there, is it possible to paint a utopia so that we have, in the benefit of hindsight, saying, "Oh, we dodged that Twitter bullet. We dodged that Instagram advertising bullet. We dodged this thing." So, is that possible? Again, that's closer to an MCU sort of situation, but I see some movie on this happening at some point.
I honestly don't know what utopia exactly looks like. But again, utopia for me would be a more efficient way of doing all the things I'm doing anyway. So let's say Twitter. I love Twitter. I'm on Twitter 3 hours a day. But if there was a platform exactly like Twitter that could never ban me for what I write, I would go there. And there is something called Farcaster, and it's beautiful. And the way they are doing all of this is also quite amazing. They've built a very similar user experience to Twitter, where there's the home button, then the search bar. It's a very, very familiar experience, and extremely high quality discussions are going on over there. And initial Twitter days, if you remember,
the beautiful days of Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
This is which
right?
one? So, I missed that.
It's called Farcaster. Yeah. So they are building a protocol for Twitter, and then people can build bigger social graph. Using their social graph, they can build better applications in the future. All of this is happening. And if I were to give you a Web2 analogy of a similar thing, Skype was there. We all use Skype for way longer than we use Zoom. Why are we using Zoom today? Zoom maybe took the business first approach, saying that, hey, all meetings should be on this, and maybe Skype was not optimized enough. Right. So we slowly moved to Zoom, and how many people use Skype now? No, nobody uses Skype. So I think it's approach.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, very simply, if you look at it this way, is that why does anyone use any platform? It's because all the people they know are using it. Like primarily, like there are leaders, okay, there are like technology leaders who move to new platforms and who set them up, and who have the potential of attracting like the the early adopters and the middle adopters. But the late adopters are all using it because everyone else is doing the same. So if someone sends me a Zoom link, I'm using Zoom. It's not that I chose Zoom over something else. In some cases, yes. I mean, say Teams is really glitchy, so I'm using Zoom instead. That is where, because I've used both platforms, I know that Zoom is better, but it's not like I am a Zoom fanboy. That's why I'm using it. Right. And so the moment a better platform that has lower latency, that has fewer drops, that allows for prevents like audio drops and prevents video drops and all that stuff, you would definitely move to that platform, but only in the case that all the other people that you are interacting with on a regular basis are there as well.
Absolutely. And these are all small steps, right? We all have our college friends group, and maybe we all catch up once a month. And there's always this one guy who says, I'll
send the link. Yeah. And then basically that's the platform you're using.
Yeah, that's the platform you're using. So imagine I'm that guy and I say, hey guys, I'm sending you a link, just join. And I send a huddle link instead of a Zoom. And then maybe some 6-7 calls later, everybody realizes it is a cool platform. Let me And the beauty of human behavior is everybody wants to be an early adopter. It means they want to show that they are an early adopter, which is why WhatsApp groups thrive. Like they want to be the first people to tell the news to the rest of the family or the friends group. So if I saw something cool and I want to go and tell my friends about it, saying that, hey man, I use Huddle. And there are all these people who love being away from the mainstream. Just because somebody likes Justin Bieber, they will hate
exactly.
it. So there are enough people like that who also do evangelism for a lot of products. So I think it will get there as soon as better products come out. And for better products to come out, the infrastructure layer should be robust and it should be a lot more efficient, which it is not now. The only way it can become faster, more efficient is when more validators come into the peer-to-peer network. More peers come into the peer-to-peer network, and
that's a catch-22, right? It's a slow as well as a catch-22 process, because like the network doesn't work as well because there are no more peers in it, and more peers aren't coming in because the network is not big enough. So that's a catch-22, and that usually gets broken by either a large influencer who's like drawing a lot of people in, a technological breakthrough of some magnitude that actually like has brought a whole bunch of people in, or some kind of like Zoom's market share is completely owed to COVID-19. Right. So you have a large global event that actually pushes people into a certain thing. So, I mean, we are probably a major network failure or a massive privacy breach or some kind of massive event away from actually like going from thinking, oh, Web3 is a cute idea to holy crap, I need to migrate my life to those technologies.
But one thing that defies these things is the rise of Bitcoin. So when Bitcoin was originally proposed, it was just a paper and no one really understood it. From there to now, people talking, there are people called Bitcoin maximalists.
It is still a paper and people still don't understand.
They still don't understand. But there are people who feel that everyone should have their money only in Bitcoin or only in cryptocurrency, because the states cannot be trusted to, because America is the biggest culprit. It's just printing money and everyone's worried about a hyperinflation phase, because China, the reason everything is cheap is because China is manufacturing a lot of stuff. And when that starts drying up for whatever reason, everyone has these huge stashes of cash chasing fewer and fewer goods. Is going to lead to hyperinflation and going to push out a lot of people at the bottom of the pyramid. That's what people feel. Inflation is a tax on the poor. It just hurts poor people.
Well said.
Yeah. So Bitcoin spread without really anyone doing it. But I guess it spread because of the pandemic and because of all the stuff that was happening during the pandemic. I don't think Bitcoin was that high before pre the pandemic, right? It wasn't that expensive.
No, it was. In 2019, there was a huge bull run in Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, is always...
I mean, explored for a whole number of reasons. And I think that itself is a different episode. Yeah. We'll just take another break right here and we will be back before you know it. And now, back to Simplified on Web3 with Siddharth. One thing I did want to ask you, Sid, and this is more on the day-to-day sort of thing. I see so many job requirements for people who have some knowledge about Web3. I saw some study recently that said that Web3 is one of the most sought-after skills on LinkedIn, as well as one of the highest-paying roles and all that. So fundamentally, what is it that somebody who is a Web3 developer do? And how is it different from, Web2 developer? Because like if I am a marketing guy in a soap company, and if I move over to an automobile company, yes, some nuances change about the industry and all that, but fundamentally what I do doesn't change. So how does that change in the case of Web2 to Web3? And I guess what I'm trying to ask is, what does a Web3 developer do?
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. So again, it's very similar to that marketing analogy you gave. The core motivators for a developer remain the same, but it is the tech stack that changes. So if you look at Python and JavaScript, these are some very high-level languages that people can learn, and you could virtually learn JavaScript in maybe a month or less, depending, and maybe write your first piece of code. But blockchain it's a deep tech. It's a very low-level language. And if somebody asked you to code in Unicode, you ask 90% of the developers in the world today to write low-level code, they won't be able to. And since blockchain is a very low-level technology, you need to know low-level code. You need to know cryptography. You need to know all of this. Again, that's an amazing skill set. But then Vitalik himself created a high-level language called Solidity, which made it easier for people to learn, developers to come and start building on Ethereum, which was the masterstroke. And Solana uses a lower-level language called Rust, R-U-S-T, and those are probably the highest paid developers in the world because it's a low-level language, very scarce resource to find somebody who knows Rust very well. And most of the time I've seen people who are great Rust developers know the workings of a computer inside out, like from the hardware level to...
So I understand why they're in demand from a demand versus supply perspective.
Correct.
But I think my question is a little more fundamental. Can't you use like tools like Python, C++, etc. to develop Web3 apps?
No, it's like speaking two different languages, right? It's not on the HTTPS protocol.
Okay.
Yeah, you cannot build straight up web apps. But again, the front end of Web3, since we are all using the HTTPS protocol,
so the front end
is the same. Everybody's using JavaScript, using CSS.
Yeah. Sometimes it makes me wonder, right? I mean, we are so used to this graphical user interface that what happens behind it is actually like completely mind-blowing. And the fact that so many billions of people use the internet, use these things so intuitively, it's a testament to the amount of work that has been done by countless people over the years, that we don't even bother with questions like this, really. But anyway, that's...
Yeah, it's crazy. We don't know the people who created the best browsers in the world.
One of them right now is a Web3 evangelist. So,
yeah.
So, sticking to what you said about Rust developers and all the other languages as well, rare languages, etc. So, how do people learn? Suppose somebody is listening to this and actually wants to become a Web3 developer. Are there institutes, or do they just learn online and put it up on LinkedIn saying that, hey, I've managed to complete this Coursera course and hence you should hire me? Like, how does one actually do that?
So, the beauty of Web3 is they don't care about your history. That's the beauty of Web3. They don't care about your history. You might have been the best Java developer there is, but that doesn't mean you will be a great Solidity developer. Because again, the language is different. Just because your English is good doesn't mean your Mandarin is good. It's that level of an analysis. Right. So they need proof of work for everything. Any Web3 company that, like even the current incubator that I'm working for, they told me they never asked me not once did they ask me what I did before. They said, why Web3? Why do you think this is going to change everything? And what have you done to contribute to the community?
Didn't ask you a single thermodynamics question.
Yeah. Thank God. Yeah. So that's what happened. And you always have to show your proof of work to get hired, because you're paying a high amount. You're paying maybe $100,000 or $200,000 per annum to somebody who just says, I'm good at Java. No, you have to show what kind of apps you have built. And for this, you need the education layer, which coming to your question, how do I learn? So if you want to learn coding in Web3 specifically, there's this large online community called BuildSpace, which a lot of people go through. Anybody new to Web3 has been on BuildSpace. Even I went on BuildSpace, of course, due to my horrible coding knowledge. I could not even go through a BuildSpace, which is considered to be the easiest way to get into Web3 as a coder. I could not get through it. And even after you finish BuildSpace, it doesn't mean that you're a good coder. You have to show something. You might have built a side project with somebody. You might have contributed to a DAO. You might have hit something called a bug bounty. Find a bug in the protocol and we'll give you X number of tokens. So you might have completed a bug bounty. Another thing to do is open source contribution. All of these major blockchains are all open source. So maybe you made an open source contribution to one of the protocols or the chains in specific. So these are all good ways to show proof of work to get a job. But to learn, many different CBCs have come up. Preeti Kasireddy, who was a former partner at A16Z, runs something called the DAP Camp. and she promises the highest quality developers.
Wow.
Yeah, so she's running it on her own in the Bay Area, and I think it's a $300 CPC, but she says it's totally worth it. Almost everybody she trains or has trained with the best developers from the top protocols. Just like how any successful CBC runs. She runs it and she gets people jobs at the top protocols. So that's another great way. But most people that I've met who are great developers learned it on their own, out of thorough, absolute curiosity. Go experiment, tinker, put it on your GitHub, show your GitHub, and get paid at the end of the day.
That's fascinating. And I mean, there are still just so many questions that are unanswered, but I guess that's kind of like the nature of this, right? I'll be honest, like this is like after a long time, like one of the most refreshing things. Refreshing conversations I've had about Web3 and like just the fact that you didn't have an answer for a lot of things and were okay saying that, I think itself just put everything at a lot of ease.
Yeah.
But I guess, for all you know, we should just make this an annual segment.
I think annual would be too long a period. I think the way the technology is evolving, and that's where, right? I mean, the thing is, what happened is, I mean, I remember our last conversation with Eklavya when we were talking about it, which was still during the bull run and everyone was talking about crypto and it was a major this thing. And then suddenly, like with the crypto crash, suddenly Web3 became like, this whole entire thing, crypto is a scam and everything gets tainted with that conversation. Yeah. And I think that's what it's like. It's how attention spans kind of work nowadays. Like everything is like very short term, evaluated on a short term, and you're either like the goods or you're a bust. And I think Web3 is, I mean, as much as it was during the bull run, I think Web3 is here to stay. And Web3 is here to kind of evolve, and it'll be the place where the new technologies of the future are getting created and going to evolve in that way. And so that's where I feel like it's something that you cannot, I mean, you probably cannot ignore just on where crypto is at, whether the market's down or up. It's something that you keep like looking at, and you have to keep evolving and keep figuring out whether this is the right solution for you, as with all the technologies that you mentioned during this conversation.
Well said. And I actually think that the crash, strange as it may be, I have a feeling that this crypto crash might actually be the best thing to happen to Web3 in some sense. A lot of the random ideas
it removes all the froth.
Possibly, in some sense, I have a feeling in about 10 years' time, you'll be drawing direct parallels between the dot-com crash of the early 2000s to the crypto crash of 2022, because that was also built up on the back of a lot of hype, a lot of VC money going in. And then the crash came, and the people who survived that crash, be it Amazon, be it Google, and all that, they ended up being the behemoths of today. And it's kind of like it's historically proven, right? Whichever companies come during a crash are the guys who have solid business models. They're able to get good quality employees. The VCs who will put their money behind those. So it's another matter now because of the nature of Web3, whether you want those behemoths, quote unquote, to come up. But I guess that's another story for our update in a few months' time.
I'll give you some good stats on this, because I've seen what's happened in the bull market and the bear market. So I joined Web3 when the bear market was, just starting, and people they didn't know when the bear market would hit. Everybody was, during that Coinbase event that happened in India and that whole thing. I was at the Coinbase event, and the organization that I work for had held a demo day, and we had like hundreds of applications coming in. And when I looked at the statistics, because I was doing the data crunching to see what kind of projects were being built, about 16% of them actually had an MVP. Everything else was an idea. And VCs at that time were just funding ideas. Wow. And we are doing a demo day tomorrow, and 92% of them have an MVP. It shows the maturity of the VCs also.
Yeah, that's amazing. It actually just backs up with numbers.
Exactly.
I just said a while back. I'm reminded of this old Dilbert cartoon during the .com.
In just a matter of a few months.
Yeah, in just a matter of a few months.
April to August.
Yeah, April to August is crazy. I remember there was this cartoon where Wally decided he was going to become an internet entrepreneur, and he put his hair in a ponytail and he started throwing jargon around. VCs came and just gave him money, not understanding what he did. and came and said, you finally during the meeting, it's been 2 months and you've burned through millions of dollars of our cash, and until you impress us with some more jargon, we're not going to give you any more money. So he says something like this, HTTP or something, he says, and then they gurgle and they give him another $1 million check. So it feels kind of like that. But Sid, this has been fascinating. It's been a really refreshing conversation. We never actually ended up talking about the network state, which is actually what led to this entire conversation.
That has to be another episode. Yeah, that's
another episode, which I think will be a very natural extension of this one. But yeah, thank you so much, Sid, and good luck with what it is that you are doing right now, scripting a new chapter in internet history, as it were. We never asked actually, what is it that you do and what is it that your company does?
So I work for an organization called Builders Tribe, where we are experimenting with community incubation for startups in Web3. So there's like a network of mentors, there's a network of capital partners. We may be the quality filter, and we are trying to do that in a scalable way. And we're experimenting with a product. And to create more awareness and to be more out there, you need to put out research. And that's what I handle. So you could say research plus content marketing plus journalism.
Yeah, very cool. So, that's a very nice intersection to be in. All right, so that's about it. So Naren, you know what to do.
Yeah, so this has been awesome. So I just want to say that stay safe, stay blockchained, and stay simplified.
Somehow stay blockchain does not give the vibes that you were thinking it does, but let's go with that. Let's go with that. Let's go with
awesome.
That.
Yeah. This has been fantastic.
Nice, Srikeit, you run off for
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.